This is one of my tomato beds, and I'm going to plant this tomato and others out right now. Now that might seem a little strange because I've got maybe another month of potential frost in this garden. But what makes it possible for me to plant a frost-tender plant like a tomato is this little thing here. It's called wall of water, my secret weapon, you might say. And quite simply, it is a series of plastic tubes that one fills with water, and this protects the plants right down to 15 degrees. In fact, there have been cases where it has been known to protect them down to 10 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a lot of frost. Well, let me show you how it's put up. First of all, put a bucket in place where you're going to put your wall of water. There's a reason for that. The wall of water is pretty flimsy at this stage, but once it's filled with water, it will stay rigid and stand up all on its own. Now, having got that in place, all we need to do is open the top and use the hose to fill that up with water. Now, I want you to notice something. I only fill the walls of water up to 2/3 to 3/4. There's a reason for that, because when it does that, your little protector comes together at the top and forms a teepee, making it even more of a protector for small plants during the coldest part of the spring. Now, as the plant grows and as the weather warms, you simply fill this up to the top, and when it does that, it will stand erect in a perfect circle. Now, all I need is to plant my first little tomato. Get it out. There we are. I put it in a pre-dug hole. And there we are. Now, the principle works this way. The sun warms the water all during the day, and of course that warmth in turn is radiated out to the plant all night long. But there's the beauty of it is that this goes off on giving heat even while it is beginning to freeze. So not until this is solidly frozen could any damage occur to this plant, and that's very unlikely to happen at this time of year. Well, there you have it. A way to get early tomatoes. I'm looking for some by July 4th. It's just possible I might be the envy of the neighborhood. Did you know that a clay pot turned upside down with a hole punched in the side and a pan of water nearby makes an attractive house for a passing toad? And that toads eat an average of 30 insects a day, including many a plant-eating slug. In the rush to get started with seedlings in the spring, or any time of year for that matter, gardeners frequently turn to this little item. It's a peat pellet, a sort of wafer of compressed peat, and the idea is to simply drop it into warm to fairly hot water, and in 15 to 20 minutes you come up with something like this. The water has been absorbed, and here you have a little self-contained little pot for growing the seedling. Simply plant the seed in the top there, and later when the seedling grows and is ready to plant outside, you simply drop it in the planting hole, and nothing else has to be done. It's as simple as that. But nowadays, gardeners have the option to make the equivalent of their own little peat pellet, using their own preferred ingredients. My favorite recipe is 2 cups of black potting soil, 2 cups of peat, 2 cups of coarse sand, and 1 cup of composted cow manure, and 1 tablespoon of lime. Now the peat, the black potting soil, and the cow manure hold moisture well and help to bind the block. The cow manure also adds slow-release nutrients, and the sand, well, that allows air to get in. Now the lime isn't all that vital, but it does help lessen the soil acidity a little, as well as providing calcium. You take all these dry ingredients, mix them together in a bowl, and then add water. And incidentally, when it comes to water, you'll probably add more than you think, or you'll need to add more than you think, because the tendency of most first-timers is to make too dry a mix. what you're looking for is something about the consistency of hot oatmeal. And once you've got it fairly moist, as I've done, I've added a little extra water, I think, to bring it up. I just mix it together, like that. That's about ready now. Now, what makes this whole operation all possible is this little gadget, a very handy handheld little gadget that makes the soil blocks. And what happens is this: you push it into the soil gets into these squares, and then you just, using the handle, you force it out. Very simple, really. Now, to make the blocks, simply push the block maker down into the mud, see that the compartments are fully charged with the mud, and then lift it out, put it over on whatever surface you're going to make the block. So I've chosen a wooden board here, and then press down on the top handle. Now, that adds compression to the block, it helps the block stay in shape, and it also squeezes out excess water. Then with your lower fingers, just lift up on the lower handle, and the sides come away, leaving the block. Now, if, as I've just done here, I've made the mud just a little too wet this time, well, fine, leave them standing for an hour or two and they'll quickly dry out. One advantage of a wooden board is that it tends to absorb excess water, and so that helps. You'll notice there's little indentations on the top of the block, and that's where we plant the seed. Well, I like to sow the seed while the blocks are still good and wet, and in this instance I'm going to sow broccoli. I'll just drop a seed in each little hole at the top, and then I prefer to cover them up with just a pinch of sand. Works very nicely, seems to get them up. And incidentally, once I've sown all the blocks I want, what I like to do is to put these blocks in a warm, light place and cover them with plastic. Now, whenever there's a need to water these blocks, a good way is to simply spray them quite thoroughly, and they'll soak in the water. But my preference is to water them from the bottom up. And what I do is I pour water in here, it circulates among the blocks, and they absorb the water from the bottom up. Any water that's still in the tray after 20 minutes, I throw out, because the blocks are unlikely to soak up any more. Now, a block like this has about enough nutrients in, depending on how vigorously the plant is growing, for 4, perhaps 6 weeks. After that, you may want to add just a little dilute liquid fertilizer. Now, the question is, how long can plants stay in here? Well, I have seen corn growing in blocks like this that were at least 12 inches high, and when they were planted out, they just never looked back. Cabbage, lettuce, beets, things like that, I let grow to at least 4 inches before I feel I need to plant them out. Tomatoes, well, at 6 inches, if I can't plant them outdoors because the weather is still behind, then I pot them up into something larger. But look at how these little beets have grown. They came up about, 1.5, 2 weeks ago when they first germinated, and very quickly they send their roots right through this block. Now, as I say, I can keep these until they're quite a lot larger and then plant them out. But the beauty when it comes to planting this out is I just make a little planting hole and drop the little thing right in. And yet another plus for soil blocks like this is when I'm all through planting, I have no plastic waste to throw away.